To the August 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please. Commissioner Pettis Reed will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Pettis.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the day that you've given us and the beautiful sunshine that we're enjoying. Father, we're so thankful for this county that we have and all the things that we have in it, and may we remember that the blessings that we enjoy here do come from you. Father, as we look at today's decisions that we make, may we make the right things that are important for those who live here, for the citizens that are here, but most importantly for what is right for Rutherford County. Father, thank you so much. Be with us, direct us, and guide us. We offer this prayer in your Son's holy name. Amen. Our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Shante.
Charlotte P. Chip Pinion. Craig Lynch. David Jones. Jim Averwater. Lee Bogle. Marvin Whitworth. Mike Cush.
Present.
Pettis Reed.
Here.
Rhonda Allen. Here. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Shante. This time we have a special introduction, and I'll call on Commissioner Craig Lynch to do that. Come up here, Craig.
I'd like to introduce to members of the Planning Commission and Rutherford County, if the TV is working, Roger Goodson. He's our new general manager at Consolidated Utility. Larry McElroy was 2 times ago. Bill Donnell was our last one, and now Roger. CUD has grown really, really fast and really good under the leadership of those two. I know his leadership is going to be even better. He started off the ground running, and he's got some great ideas. He comes from Illinois. He drinks pop, and sometimes he says y'all. So we got it. Roger.
Thank you. Thank you. Really just excited to be here. I'm learning to say y'all. I'm learning not to say pop. It's or soda or Coke. So, anyways, love it here. Been here about 3 months now. Looking forward with the growth. I've had the opportunity in past previous experience in areas that were growing, so looking forward to really watching what we can do and the great things that Rutherford County is doing and what CUD can continue to help the county grow. So looking forward to meeting everybody and working with all of you. So working with y'all. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome aboard, Mr. Goodson. This time we need to read and approve the minutes of our May 24th meeting. I'll call on Vice Chair Pettis Reed.
Mr. Chairman, I have a copy of those minutes here. I've gone through those, and I move for their approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve our May 24th meeting minutes. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We have 3 items that have been withdrawn. Items 6B2, 6B4, and 6C2. That takes us into our new business. Item 6A, we have 1 item that's been submitted for preliminary plan approval. The item number is 21-1012, Nature Walk, Section 4, 22 lots on 11.9 acres on PUD located along Helen Holly Lane. Investment Homes is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. The preliminary plan for Nature Walk, this development, was approved by the Planning Commission back in January of 2014. I did put an attachment with your staff comments that kind of showed the approved layout. The layout of this section has changed due to the loss of several lots because of septic soil issues. Since the lot sizes were actually increasing in this section, the number of lots decreasing, we did not feel that this met the threshold of a major deviation to either the approved approved pattern book, excuse me. But we did request a revised preliminary plan be reviewed by the Planning Commission for this particular section. And just so you are aware, this is the final section of this development. Our comments have been addressed. This preliminary plan is in good order. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Meet all of our requirements?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Nature Walk Section 4, item number 21-1012. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6B, we have 5 items, 2 that have been withdrawn, that have been submitted for final plat approval. 6B1, the item number is 19-2091, Frank Beard subdivision, 3 lots on 4.71 acres zoned RM, located along West Gum Road. Frank Beard is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This plan probably looks familiar to most of you. This was originally approved by the Planning Commission back in May of last year, but for one reason or another was never recorded. Final plat approvals are good for 12 months, and if it's not recorded within that time frame, their approval expires. Essentially, what they're asking for is a reapproval of this plat. Nothing has changed. They just want to renew the plat in order for recording it. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve with staff comments.
I have a motion and a second to approve Frank Beard subdivision, item number 19-2091. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6B2 has been withdrawn. Item 6B3, Stacy and Stacy. Item number is 21-2058, 2 lots on 4.57 acres zoned RM, located along Old Lebanon Road. Sam Stacy is the applicant. This includes a waiver for the creation of a non-buildable lot. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, this probably looks familiar to the Commission. You granted a waiver to this request back in June of this year, June 29th. The plat that you see before you is consistent with that. Essentially what they're doing is really just shifting some lot lines around between the existing property and the remaining tract. The issue that brought this to our attention was the fact that by shifting these lot lines around, we realized that while the acre lot in and of itself was platted originally, the remaining acreage was not. And since it was under 5 acres at the time, it should have been. So this really rectifies the situation. The plat has been amended to meet our standards, and we have no issues with it. We'd recommend approval.
Questions?
So they're just going to add the property to the neighboring property?
Correct. Yeah, it's in the same ownership. It's just they're shifting some lot lines around.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 21-2058 for Stacy and Stacy. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? The motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6B4 has been withdrawn. Item 6B5, Nature Walk Section 3. Item number is 21-2060, 3 lots on .54 acres on PUD located along Beulah Rose Drive. Investment Homes and A&R Land Investments are the applicants. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. An amendment to the Nature Walk subdivision plan development was approved by the Board of Commissioners back in September of 2018. The amendment called for a new street between lots 30 and 32, which would contain about 8 lots, and I included an attachment with your staff comments to kind of show that original layout. The Planning Commission also granted preliminary approval of this back in December of 2018. Again, similar to what happened with the plat or the preliminary plan we looked at for Section 4 of Nature Walk just a few minutes ago, the number of lots in development has been reduced due to available septic soils. So what the applicant's proposing to do is just return to the original layout of these lots. That affected area in the back is no longer going to be develop with any lots or anything. So we didn't consider this a major deviation since this was the original design in the first place, and the number of lots was decreasing. Everything else about it met the plan development application. So our comments have been addressed. That just gives you a little bit of background as far as what brought this plat back for your consideration. We'll be happy to answer any questions at this point. This plat appears to be in good order.
So y'all are very well satisfied with what they have made the changes, what you requested?
Yes, sir. This was going to be the original layout anyway, so, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move the approval with staff comments.
I have a motion and a second to approve Nature Walk Section 3, 21-2060. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6C, we have 3 items that are submitted for site plan approval. 1 has been withdrawn. Item 6C1, villas at Saddlewood. The item number is 21-3013, construction of 124 multifamily units, 31 buildings on 54 acres on PUD located along Highway 96. Land venues is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. A plan development amendment for this property was approved by the Board of Commissioners earlier this year, back in April. The site plan in and of itself appears to be consistent with that approved pattern book. However, there have been several deficiencies in the plan that we've identified. Now, that being said, the applicant and their design engineer, they have addressed a number of our concerns, but there still are a few on here. I'll address a couple, and I know Mike's got a few that he'd like to address as well. The development is showing sidewalks around the entire basically throughout the entire development on both sides of the road. What we're seeing, there's a couple things. Some of the driveways that you're looking at on some of these buildings, one of the sheets in the plan, and the plan set is on your iPads. I will caution it's a very large set, so you may have some trouble navigating around with the iPads, just FYI. But you can tell by looking at some of these driveways, they're rather shallow. While they can get 2 cars side by side, staff has concerns that the cars are actually going to hang over the sidewalk. Because obviously, if you were to park right against the garage, you might have a little bit of clearance, but most people aren't going to do that because they don't want to damage their garage door. So they're probably going to overhang the sidewalk to some extent. So we've asked them to look at that. Some of the parking areas, as you can see, Mike's got actually a good example right there, right to the north of where you're looking, Mike, where the extra parking spaces are. Yeah, there you go. Several of the parking spaces, little lots around there, if you're walking on the sidewalk, you have to basically get out into the road because the cars, if there's any cars parked there, they're going to be extending out into that walkway. So sidewalks are going to have to be placed around the parking areas so that doesn't happen. So that was something that we saw as well. There's been several discussions that we've had with CUD regarding the location of several of these step tanks. As far as the grading and drainage over those, I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about that, and Jason Laxon, of course, is here to speak more in depth on that issue if need be. But those are some of the issues that we have with this, but I'll turn it over to Mike for him to get a little more in depth of some of the drainage issues that were there.
Thank you, Doug. Following up with what Doug said at the beginning, and it's more of a CUD issue and not a county engineering issue, is the step tanks. Several of them are located uphill of the townhomes, and the service lines in the building will need to be gravity fed to the step tanks, and the tank itself will have a pump and then pump up and into the step system. So what we're seeing is, and it's like I said, it's all up to CUD and the design team to work out, but we've got several of the tanks are uphill of the finished floors of the townhomes. So we're thinking that it's not going to be able to gravity flow into the step tank to function properly. So that needs to be worked out. It's a very tight design, very compact design, so we're thinking those things need to be worked out with CUD and the design team. That might cause buildings to move, step tanks to move, so you can kind of see this step tank right here. It's sitting between a 66 and 65 contour, so 65 and a half, but this floor is at 62.8. So you've got a service line that goes down and will have to gravity flow into a step tank. That step tank's going to have to be super deep, and I think CUD's got a limit of 2 foot of a riser. They don't want the tank super deep in the ground because they've got to get in there and work on them. So we think that needs to be worked out. But this is a site plan. There are several things that I wanted the design team to ask for, essentially waivers. A site plan is different from a county subdivision road. You know, it's got some more leeway, but this is set up as a private street with all these units around. So there are several things that their private streets are supposed to be designed as public streets. So they are asking for waivers, changes from those standards. So some of the things that they're proposing, they are proposing 10-foot lanes instead of 11-foot lanes with curb and gutter. Our typical road section is 2 11-foot lanes and with curb and gutter on either side. They are also using super elevated roads, so the roads are completely banked, and typically in a county subdivision it has a normal crown, so the water drains off on either direction. This way they're forcing the water all to one side. This next thing is they're using curb cuts instead of inlets. If this were a county road, we would require curb inlets instead of curb cuts with pipes and the drainage network. The road itself, like I said, will be a private street instead of a public right-of-way. So these will be essentially ingress, egress, and public utilities. They're 40-foot wide instead of our typical 50-foot. Another thing is they're asking to have the sidewalk directly behind the curb and gutter. Typically what the ADA requires is a 4-foot grass strip behind the curb to allow the adequate slope for a ramp to get up onto the sidewalk. So it's not impossible, it's just not our standard. And Doug mentioned earlier, several of the sidewalk areas, there's a broken pedestrian path that needs to be corrected. So if somebody's coming down this sidewalk and visitors are parked in these spots, they will either have to get into the road or walk around. And some places it'll be a little challenging with these grades to get that to work. So they need to make a continuous pedestrian route around the parking spots. Let me get to another page. So they've got drainage. They've got 2 large stormwater detention basins. They will be a wet pond, permanent pools of water. They will meet our stormwater quality requirements, but I always ask for, and we always in the county always ask for, an emergency spillway. So if heavy storm comes, over capacity of these ponds, or the pipes get clogged, where is that water going to go? And that's why I always ask, where is this water going to go? From pond 2 to pond 1, it will build up and spill over and go through this gazebo, which is not a big issue, and then go into this second pond. The The thing that I'm asking them to ask y'all for is Pond 1 has an outlet structure down here. And like I said, I always plan for the best, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. So I always think that, we always have to look at Murphy's Law. If this pipe gets overwhelmed, a heavy storm comes in, gets clogged or something, where is this water going to go? So there is a curb cut where the street drains into the pond, but this is the lowest elevation of the pond here. So the road itself is going to be the emergency spillway for this pond. So the adjacent townhomes, their elevations will be higher than this road elevation where water will collect here. So if this pipe gets clogged, where's the water going to go? It's going to back up into this road, and then it's going to build up and spill over, and I believe it's going to go down to the emergency access drive through here. I don't think it's going to get into the buildings, but you always have to plan for the worst case scenario if the stormwater system for the pond gets overwhelmed or clogged or anything like that. Where's that water going to go? And it's going to go into this road network and then go down this emergency access drive. So in itself, I'm not worried about the living space, the corridors, but you will have, in rare instances, you will have water standing in the road until the water can go down in the pond itself. And one of the issues, I don't think it's, Doug didn't think it was an issue, but the pattern book showed dumpsters, and I think they said they were going to have carts, trash carts, but we need to know where the trash cart's going to be stored when they're not in use. So those are some of the things that I've pointed out, but I'll go back to CUD. I think the biggest thing is you can see this design is very compact, very tight. If step tanks have to move, the buildings are going to have to move. Grades are going to have to change. So that's what I'm thinking. They need to work this out with CUD and make sure CUD is okay with the step tank locations, and can these step tanks serve the buildings that they're intended. So again, I'll go back. This is a site plan, so and a plan development, so they're writing their own rules. I'm just noting to y'all that several things that they're wanting to do are outside of our normal requirements. If this were a public street, public design, I would say nope, can't do it, doesn't meet our standards. But this is a site plan. It's set up as a private road network, so I just wanted y'all to be aware of things that they're changing from our normal. Yes, sir. The HOA will be responsible for the streets, drainage network, everything on here. I assume that these will be a horizontal property regime, so I don't know I believe each person or family will own the townhome itself, but everything outside will be maintained by an HOA.
And when you said that spillover goes through that emergency access road,
yes, sir.
And you said, I don't think that will be a problem.
Well, it will have water in the road.
I think we want to hear you say proof positive it won't be a problem. Instead, I don't think.
Well, that's the way it's designed right now. And I always, like I said, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I always want the houses up high, and I ask the design engineers, where's that water going? If it can't go through the pipe, the outlet network of the pond, it's got to have a designed pathway for where that water will go, that it won't impact anybody. So
this is a really bad day to bring this up since Waverly is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So like I said, we design Our drainage network for the 25-year storm event. Our ponds have to detain the 2, 5, 10, and 25 and 50-year storm events. They had 17 inches of rain in 24 hours. You know, I cannot positively say that that will not happen here. We will not get a storm larger than these are designed for. So the water, you've got to assume that the water's got to go somewhere. If it can't go through that pipe network, it's got to go somewhere. And it's going into this private road network and between a couple buildings.
Is that it, Doug? Mike?
Sorry, I tend to ramble sometimes, but drainage is an issue I follow closely.
I will say the applicant is present if you had any specific questions for him.
Just quickly go over these again for us.
Okay.
Roads that aren't wide enough, parking lots that aren't wide, parking spaces that aren't sufficient and wide enough, septic tanks that aren't approved or we're not sure that will drain correctly, water flow that we're not sure it will handle a flood. Was there anything else I'm missing?
There's sidewalks. There's not a grass strip between the back of curb and the sidewalk, like as typical ADA recommends. There's not flat out denial, but you'll have to have a special designed ramp to allow someone in a wheelchair to be able to get up on the sidewalk. No, ma'am. There's typically a grass strip between the back of curb to allow a gentle ramp up.
So no sidewalks and not handicap accessible to add to that list?
Well, they do have ramps, but like Doug was saying, in these visitor parking spots, there's not a continuous way around them. You either have to get off into the street to go around, or you have to, this way you have to get in the street to get around.
Not handicap accessible. My question is, why is this even being brought to us with all these issues?
Is there a motion? Is that a motion, Commissioner P.?
Well, I can at least answer the question before a motion's made. Of course, you know, we have certain statutory requirements and things we do have to bring things before you. Now, we made the applicant clear that we had these concerns and we weren't sure how this would be received at the Planning Commission. But that being said, I mean, the same thing happens with when somebody makes an application on something. I mean, it has to come before you at some point. So they were aware of these issues. We did tell them on the front end that we had our concerns. So again, the applicant is here that can speak maybe more to that. But I mean, like I said, statutorily, we do have to bring things before you, even if we know they're not necessarily ready for action at this point.
Mr. Commissioner. Chairman, regardless if it's a private street segment or not, the first call is going to be to your office if this floods or when this floods. We dealt with one very similar to this out on 231 Walter Hill that I thought was challenging. This seems more significantly challenging than with the depth of the driveways, the ADA compliance, the super elevation you were talking about, which, you know, there's a lot of curves in this roadway. It just seems like there's a lot of issues that could be stacked and against if any one of those combine or are met individually as a challenge in and of itself, but there's several things combined here that lead me to think that it just needs to be reworked and it's too constrained and there's too many issues that, I mean, the ADA issue, the driveway depth issue, the drainage issues, they're just compounding in my mind, and I know the site is challenging, but there's got to be a way to figure that out in a way that we can all end up with a good development here. And I think there's potential here, but there's just some things, private road or not, if that spillway is the roadway, then they're going to call the office first thing. I mean, and you hate to punt that back to the HOA and say, nope, not our problem. So if we're sitting here approving it, it is somewhat our problem as well. So.
Is there a motion in that, Commissioner?
I'll give
Vogel?
Commissioner Reed a second, and then you can circle back to me.
I don't care.
My understanding, these are all going to be private roads, right? They're not going to come under counties whatsoever. And what was being said over here is the fact that whenever there's a problem develops there, it's going to come to your office. No, it's not going to come to your office. It's going to come whoever that commissioner is sitting out there. And whenever they want something out there, when somebody new moves in, they're going to come over that commissioner. HOA, I mean, you can say HOA all day long, but they're going to show up on that commissioner's porch. And the reason I'm saying this is I've got one in front of me. And I've spent several summers dealing with situations like this. That's why I have rocking chairs and swings on my front porch. They come and sit and talk with me about this. Because you can say all day those are private roads and whatever, but if it's built right here in Rutherford County and if they flood, nobody calls that HOA. It immediately gets all over social media that this flooded and this county commission approved it. And that's what they're going to do. Mr. Chairman, I move to deny.
I have a motion and a second to deny. I think the applicant wants to say something. I'm not inclined to allow that unless there's a need for it. Is there a particular need that you guys want to hear from the applicant? You got 2 minutes. Be quick.
Yeah, Jim Heisen and Land Development, Land Venues. I just want to say I feel I've got a pretty good working relationship with Mike and Doug and Jason and everybody, but all I was going to suggest was I'll be happy with the deferral and take the next 30 days to work on some of these issues. I don't have a problem with that if you're so inclined. So that's all I want to say. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Because I've made the motion. You're willing to work out all these issues that he's brought up, right?
Yeah, we've had meetings with them. We're going to meet with Jason. Some of this stuff came to my light just recently, and if I just get another 30 days, I think we can work through some of these. We've done it before. The whole impetus of this project was to lessen the impact and consolidate it, and it is tight. I'll give it that.
I'm still very concerned about the fact that I mean, we've already seen this right here, and I'm very concerned about the fact of narrow roads not even meeting standards, as well as the other things. We're going to be discussing today about the facts of cars parked within the roads and things of this type.
Right.
You know, I know we're supposed to be coming forward with whenever we deny something, we have a purpose or whatever. I think I've heard a number of things here that are reasonings to do this. If those who have second, if you're willing to defer it, I mean, I will withdraw my motion.
If it is deferred, or if it is denied, you do get the opportunity to come back at some point, though, correct?
They could. I mean, this is a little bit of a unique situation because the plan development, the zoning's been approved for this project. Now, the site plan for what they're asking for, you know, at this time we don't feel meets our standards. I think it could be denied based on that. That doesn't mean they can never come back. They could just come back with a revised plan. Now, it might make more sense, as Mr. Heisen was suggesting, to just simply defer it to let them work on it. There's a lot here, as you've heard. I don't know if 30 days is going to be enough time, but there are, we have up to 90 days within our ordinance to make a decision on a site plan. So there is time in there. If you'd rather go a deferral route, that might be more appropriate in this case.
If it takes 60 days to make sure that we have that, that's fine too.
Thank you.
They've detailed a lot of the waivers that they're asking for on your iPad if you wanted to look at each one. And this is one that we're talking about on the roads, the narrower lanes, the super elevation, the sidewalks abutting the curb and gutter.
So if we stick with the denial, what changes for them? They just have a certain amount of time they have to wait? Is it the 90 days before they can resubmit, or what happens there?
I mean, there's not a minimum time for them to resubmit.
So they can resubmit?
Yeah, they can resubmit
Okay.
whenever. There's
Well,
not
my
for rezoning, right.
My inclination is not to withdraw the second for denial on that, because there was a lot of, this is the most waiver request letters I've ever seen associated with the site plan, and I think it needs to go back and be reworked, and I'm going to stick with my denial.
Well, I think let's just make it clear that, I mean, even if the denial moves forward, they're not precluded from coming back with another site plan, just so everybody's aware of that. Okay.
I'm basically making my motion based upon the fact they're just not meeting standards of what we have.
Okay. I think we're all on the same page.
We have a motion and a second.
Second, based on that.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to deny Villas at Saddlewood 21-3013, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Motion to deny carries. Thank you. 6C2 has been withdrawn. 6C3, item number 21-3015, Murfreesboro Self-Storage Phase 2, construction of 17,600 square feet of mini storage warehouses on 5.02 acre site, zoned PUD located along Franklin Road. Murfreesboro Storage Fund is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The plan development for this property was approved by the Board of Commissioners back in November of 2016. The layout of Phase 2 is generally consistent with that PUD approval. We have a couple of concerns on here. Most of our comments have been addressed. The ones that remain, one of them goes to the existing septic system on the property. As you can see, the existing septic system is going to be in a portion of where they're building Phase 2, which means they're going to have to relocate the septic system. They are showing septic soils, as you can see on the site plan. However, there's a good chance a lot of that soil is probably not going to be usable. There was a large tree that was there that was taken out, pretty much uprooted, which disturbed a lot of those soils. Our understanding is that the existing home is really going to be more of an office, so probably won't need the soil requirement, as much soil as an existing house would, but that's something that they do need to verify with TDEC. Obviously, they'll have to verify that before moving forward with any building permit for this. The other issue has to do with the downstream drainage. I'll let Mike get into that in a little more detail, but beyond that, most of our other comments have been addressed, so I'll turn it over to Mike.
Yes, thank you, Doug. So they are proposing a second stormwater detention pond, and we always require that they look at the next two downstream drainage structures, and this culvert under Deer Run is the first one, and I don't believe we have those evaluations yet. So it's not a big issue. It's just that something we need, a box we need to check off. The timing of the septic system, if this is a functioning office or even a home, I'm thinking this needs to be evaluated and the new system installed before they take the old system offline. Just make sure that there's not a break in service. If there are people working there or living in that home. So, and then I think that's the only thing. One more thing. Let me pull up. Sorry, I got to log back in. The technology gremlins were at work this morning. Kind of see from, let me get there. Here is the first phase think you can see. And there are several, looks like RVs and campers and stuff parked around there. If they're proposing that again, just want to make sure that, you know, fire trucks can get through there with the RVs parked in those locations. And don't remember if they were planning that or not on here. The first plan didn't show parking spots, but some came about, so I just want to make sure that the fire truck can still get through there.
Yeah, and I'll kind of just address that, continue on, just kind of dovetail off of what Mike said. This phase does not propose any actual vehicle parking. Actually, some of these will allow for the storage of vehicles. They're going to be a little bit larger structures, so that'll take care of that. But they're not planning on any other outdoor storage. We already told them that that wasn't part of their original PUD, so they need to remove that.
Staff have a recommendation?
I mean, personally, I think we're comfortable with this being approved, just subject to our staff comments. The remaining issues can be worked out before building permits are issued.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve 21-3015 Murfreesboro Self-Storage Phase 2. Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do remember this Phase 1 and this project really well, and there was a water line at the roadway, and there was right-of-way dedication. Was all that taken care of as well in this second phase, or was that all done?
I believe it was. Yeah, I mean, the line's in, so the new line from CUD is in, so
Okay,
everything
so
else I think is fine.
all those conflicts have been resolved?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve with staff comments, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 7, we've got some other business. Doug?
Yes, sir. Just wanted to kind of follow up with you all on the cargo container and outdoor storage of major recreation equipment. On your iPads, you'll have the revisions that we made based on our conversations from last month, and I think Mike's going to have them on the big screen as well. As far as the cargo containers, what we ended up doing, most of that is pretty much the same as what we had talked about. What we ended up doing, though, under C3 was changing that just a little bit. Containers would not be allowed for storage of motorized equipment or vehicles. However, we do realize that there may be people that want to use them for that purpose. So what we ended up doing on letter D, just a little further down, we kind of beefed that up just a little bit. Basically, if somebody wants to modify one of these for the purpose of anything other than storage, including the storage of fuel-powered equipment, which could be lawnmowers, cars, whatever, motorized vehicles, they have to meet the applicable standards, not limited to building and fire codes. We do have, of course, Tanya Bell, our codes director, and Josh Sanders is here, our fire marshal. We had a meeting with both of them and kind of crafted some of this language. So that was the primary change we made to that. Now, most of the changes that we did make were on the next section, which had to do with outdoor parking of storage, of major recreational equipment. What we ended up doing is kind of reworking the whole section. Most of the standards that were there we put under general standards, where equipment had to be for personal use only, not associated with business activity. Equipment had to be the property of the owner or the resident of the dwelling unit in the event that they're renters. Indoor storage would not be precluded from this. If they wanted to have indoor storage of other boats, RVs, etc., they could certainly do that on their lot. We did add some language in there regarding the parkage of recreational vehicles and watercrafts. You'll see that on letter D, provided that adequate parking area exists to meet the ordinance requirements, which is in Appendix D. And we reworked letter E a little bit just to make the language of that was just not real clear. Basically what that is saying is for a lot that has two principal dwellings on it, both of them could have the boat or RV storage is what we were shooting for there. The way it was worded originally was a little wonky, in my opinion. The largest change we made, though, and this goes to the discussion that we had about the number of these that we would allow on a lot. What we ended up doing on the, I guess that's page 3 of 5, under number 2, we kind of broke it into different categories. If it was less than an acre, you would be allowed under A to have no more than one of the following, either one watercraft and trailer, 2 all-terrain vehicles, 1 utility trailer, or a camping RV, camping trailer RV. If you go to B, that changes from 1 acre to 5 acres. You could have one of each of those items in A, and then if you have 5 acres or larger, you could have multiple items of those listed under, again, OA2, which is those 4 items. We thought maybe that would be the best way to handle something like that. Again, we're just trying to respond to some of the concerns that we heard during our last discussion. That's kind of what we came up with. Again, we're not married to this by any means, so be happy to answer any questions or have some additional discussion on this if you think we're heading in the right direction on this.
Doug, quick question. Without reading these pages, let me just get to the question. Is there any notation in here about screening, whether it's landscaping or fencing, to block the view of any of these recreational vehicles if they're outside on a 1 to 5 acre lot?
From a screening and land, there's not, no, sir. Under the cargo containers, we do have some language in there about making them, let's see, that's under E, exterior wall covering, so they just don't look like metal containers. We're asking or requiring some treatment of those exterior wall coverings, but not for RVs and boat storage or anything like that, no.
Farm use, agriculture
would be exempt. Any buildings like that would be exempt.
All are
anyway.
exempt.
Yes, sir. We didn't add anything specifically to that section on the cargo containers, I don't believe, just because of the fact that there's already a catch-all in the ordinance that covers all that anyway.
The next step would be to move this forward for a public hearing?
That's correct, because this is an ordinance amendment, so it would require a public hearing before both Planning Commission and County Commission before it takes effect.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question for Doug.
Rhonda.
On P1A, where you've got no more than one temporary portable structure for storage or removal, and I'm thinking about if we were remodeling, I might need a pod for my good stuff, and I might need a dumpster for the things I'm going to dispose of. And the way I'm reading this, I can only have one or the other. Is that correct?
Let me just make sure I understand what you're asking. If you're making if you're making a renovation to your house, what you're saying is you would have something to live in and then something to throw stuff away in? Is that,
no, not to live in. Like if my good furniture that's in the living room, but I'm redoing the living room and the kitchen, I need to put that somewhere while I'm remodeling. I need the dumpster so I can throw the things away that I'm discarding. Where can I put that furniture? So the way I'm reading this, I can only have one or the other. I can't have both.
I would say that's correct, the way that this is worded right now. We hadn't thought of that. So that is something we might be able to tweak the language some.
On the last sentence, you've got here, one permit extension for no more than 60 days may be requested and granted by the planning director. I would be perfectly comfortable with you granting use of 2.
Depending on the situation.
Depending on the situation,
okay.
right.
Yeah, we can word that in there. Yeah, that should be pretty easy.
I thought about 6 months ago, plus or minus, we talked about temporary containers for renovation and remodeling, and we came to some agreement about 30 day and then extension by you or by Tanya. Did Rhonda's question not come into play at that point?
I'm trying to think of what we may have been talking about. You'll have to forgive me. Memory's not what it used to be. Tanya, go ahead. Do you recall that?
Well, I think what he's referring to is when we first started talking about this, and we just kind of discussed that we were going to look into this and look into this further. I don't think any decision was made back then, and that certainly didn't come up. That's something that we hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
This could actually be still brought before the Planning Commission at our September 13th meeting.
Yes, sir. Yeah, what we're talking about, that should be pretty simple to take care of.
Mr. Chairman, the cargo containers for storing those fuel-powered equipment, did we decide that that's mainly due to ventilation? Is that
I think that was one of the big issues, yes, sir.
Because they're typically all metal or something.
Right.
They may have a wood floor, but it's mainly for ventilation purposes. Okay.
Right, and it gets really, really hot in those. Yeah, I'll let, Tanya and Josh, if they want to make any additional comments, but that was one of the big issues I remember. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we need a motion or anything, but if you're comfortable with this, based on our discussion today, we can move it forward from that.
Wanda?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one more thing. I'd just like to hear the commissioner's thoughts on this. On the lot sizes between 1 and 5 acres, where we're limiting the amount of recreational equipment they can have, I guess part of my brain is thinking, okay, between 1 and 5 acres, that's a large swath of land. And so I'm just thinking if there was some way to maybe put in there that it could be, as long as it was behind the primary structure or screened or, something along those lines so that it's not detracting from the neighbors. I'm wondering if we don't need to give them a little more latitude than being that restrictive.
Okay. Yeah, and we can play with some language on that and discuss that more at the public hearing, I think. I understand where you're going with it, so I think, go ahead.
I think we did put something in there that allows them to have additional if they store them in a structure. So if they were to build a metal building, they can have as many as they want. They just need to store them in a building, which would,
assuming that
essentially.
Assuming they met their detached accessory and lot coverage and all that, obviously that would have to be done.
Well, here's part of what I'm thinking is typically when we create a regulation, it's because of someone else's bad behavior. And so we're trying to limit future bad behavior. So I don't necessarily want to penalize neighbors and require them to build structures unnecessarily if they can do this in such a way that it does not detract from their neighbors. And so immediately what's coming to mind is, my father had a 5-acre tract of land. It might be 4.9, He was a quasi-farmer, not really. I don't think he would have fallen under the agricultural exemption. But I think about how he and his neighbors lived and how he and his neighbors, coexisted in a positive way. And so I'm just trying to think about examples like that, where you're not right up on top of each other. So you might even get some feedback from commissioners like Commissioner Reed and different ones that are in the rural areas, and just make sure that we're not penalizing some folks that have a large tract of land. They're not having any bad behavior. And so I don't want to do anything that's going to detract from their quality of life just because we had an isolated 1 or 2 incidents where people, it did create problems for their neighbors.
Yeah, understood. We can definitely do that.
And that was part of our discussion last time, because a lot of the places that were agricultural zoned are now residential medium density. I have one of those, and thinking, well, now you're restricting what I can buy and what I can't buy. And so we try to, like you say, get along with neighbors that have been there for generations. And the way it's written, I think when you get up to the 3 to 5 acre, you're talking about potentially being built today as estate lots. And those would probably have more restrictive covenants associated with those anyway that would probably help support this.
Right, and some of this, you're absolutely right. I remember at the last meeting we talked about this, the idea was brought up, well, maybe in these developments, especially with smaller lots, maybe they set aside an area, which I think is definitely worth something to look into, and we're going to mention that when we start talking to new applicants that may come in for this, say, hey, maybe set aside an area for boat, RV, large vehicle storage, just because most of these smaller lots just simply can't handle that.
And then that could be landscape screened, whatever we decide to do there.
Exactly.
questions, other comments? Josh, you okay?
Okay.
Without objection, we'll have a public hearing on this at our September 13th meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that will create more discussion, and we can make a decision at one time with public input. Is that okay with everybody? Anything else, Doug?
No, I think we're fine at this point. Mike, did you have anything? Okay.
Our next meeting is scheduled for September the 13th. That'll be a Monday at 6 p.m. right here in this courtroom. Anyone have anything else? Once again, thank you for your participation and your time today. We are adjourned.